Hi everyone, I'm Tech Bob, and welcome to eTech Facebook Live Fridays. Today we're covering the common power-related issues when it comes to iPhones, iPads, and Samsungs. The three specific scenarios we're going to be covering are devices not charging, intermittent power or boot looping, and no power at all. I'm going to be taking you through each device scenario, how to identify, and how to potentially resolve. The biggest thing in all of these scenarios is figuring out what the cause is, because without knowing that, you're just spending countless hours time figuring out what exactly you need to replace. Before I get into that, two things I'm going to mention. One, we have a giveaway today. We can call this Tech Bob's Toolkit over here on my left-hand side. These are the common hand and small tools that I use every day, from screwdrivers to tweezers to clamps. It's over $100 value. And the way you win it is by being present today. That's that's the first requirement. And the second is I'm going to mention a keyword later on in the stream, just at a random time. The first person to comment that keyword on this live video, or say no one comments live, but they comment on the post after, will win this kit. We'll ship it to you. So the only exceptions are going to be employees cannot win, or employee family members that were told about this in advance. So unfortunately, you're not qualified for that. And we are only shipping in the US, so it does not qualify if you are international. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to switch over to the overhead camera. So you can see right here, for charging related issues, I would say the biggest tool to have is an ammeter, or something that tells you what your charge current is. This right here is a small version that has two different ports. Over here on my right, I'll bring it under the camera. This is a larger version that has multiple ports. So it has actually it's 4 USB ports, 1 USB-C, and then it has a wireless charger on the top. It doesn't give you the rate on the wireless charger, but it does give you the charging rate on all of the ports down here. So what you want to see when you plug in a device is that amperage is being pulled. Amperage is the flow of current going into your device. So for example, I'm going to take, this is an iPhone 7 right here, just as is, without, this one doesn't have any issues by default. So we're going to plug in our screen, plug in our battery last. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in my charging cable. Then we're going to look at the ammeter, see if I can see it. Can you see that, Scott? Okay, cool. So it's pulling a current of 1.6 to 1.5 amps. That's good. You don't want to see here is it pulling nothing at all, or pulling 0.0 something of an amp, or it's jumping all over the place. So it's gone from 1 point. That's okay. Current depending on what the battery is. For example, the battery here is at 62%. The way Apple designs these devices is they fast charge up to 80%, and then the last 20% they trickle or slow charge. That's supposed to help with the health of the battery. But this right here tells me if there's something going on with what's pulling the current. So as far as common causes of a charging issue, the first one is this right here, the cable or the charging source. So whether you have a block like this or a separate cable, these can go bad. And it's great to have one, so you know if it's working on all other devices but not working on this device, then it's not your charger. But if someone comes in to your repair shop, or you're a DIYer, and one charger is not working, that doesn't mean that the device has something wrong with it. I would try another charger just to be safe, unless the charger you're using is working on other devices. Over time, these cables will fray from the tips, or the actual pins on the end can get worn out. There's corrosion and other damage that can happen to them. If those break down, it won't charge. So this is number one cause, is going to be your charging cable or your charging block. Number two, this is still non-invasive, is going to be your charging port, the port itself. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it might be dirty. A good sign of that is if you take your cable and plug it in and it doesn't click in there and you can feel like resistance, there's something in the back there. Usually belly button because it's the bottom part of the phone. The lint that's in your pocket, or say it's in a purse or a bag or whatever it may be, what happens is it loosely gets inside of there. When you plug the cable, not knowing that it's there, you actually pack it into the back of the port. So over time that starts to build up and you end up with enough of a solid piece to where it doesn't let that cable go in all the way. So a quick way to fix that, you can use canned air. So something like this right here, just a couple quick sprays. If it's really packed in there, you can use some tweezers to help pull that out. And then finally, you can use a little bit of alcohol and a brush just to clean the contacts. But if you clean it and it's still not working, there is a chance that the port's just too far gone. So that's the non-invasive way to identify a charging issue, what it could potentially be. Now, when you get inside the phone, there's a number of other items that can cause charging issues. What you want to do is start with the easiest one and go from there. To me, would be the easiest one. What you want to do is disconnect that battery, and then you take another battery and you just dry fit it. So you lay it on top of the old one, plug it in without fully installing or removing the other one, and then try to charge the phone again. If the phone charges now, then you know that part was bad. And it's just a process of trial and error. You try one part, issues still persist, you try the next part. Charging port, or sorry, the battery would be the easier one in this case. You can do the same thing I'm doing with the battery right here with the charging port. It's just a little bit not more complicated. I would say it's hard to get the port in there because of how it fits. It kind of folds over, so I'll show that next. So that was the battery. I'm going to unplug that. So now my port, move this out of the way. Let me zoom in slightly. So I'm going to unplug my charging port, which is this cable right here. So the port itself sits in like this, and then this folds over. So to plug it in, we actually have to plug the port in like that. What I'm going to do is unplug my screen just so it's out of the way. Make sure I'm still in frame. I'm going to plug my port in, my new one. Plug my screen in. Then this is where it's tricky. You have to plug the battery in without disconnecting the charging port. And this is where, when I said it's not hard, it's just a little bit, you have to manipulate the port. Plug the cable in, and then again, we'll look at the ammeter. Zoom out slightly. We have on the second to last port, it's pulling 1 amp. Other thing too, so this is good to mention that sometimes different chargers have different charging speed capabilities. For example, this port on the far right and the first port, they're quick charging ports. USB-C and where you see QC are going to be a faster charge rate. So just because you don't see it at 2 amps anymore doesn't mean it's bad. So right now it's pulling 1 amp because this port doesn't supply as much amperage. But you'll see here on the phone, I'll zoom in a little bit, we're still getting that charging indicator. So we know that this port is good. And question that typically pops up here is, how do you know to do this? And the number one answer is you basically try it until it doesn't work, or until it starts working, until the scenario. I tried a battery. If that fixed it, I would stop there. If that didn't fix it, I would try a charging port, and then I would stop there. So you try those things until you get a different scenario, and then you know that that's the identified issue. Now, outside of the parts that are in the charging circuit, another thing that can cause an issue, so there's 2 more. There's a bad modular part. So that comes from like a bad camera, or a bad speaker really won't cause it, but anything with a lot of electronics in it, if there's a part that's damaged and it's plugged into the board, it can cause a short, which will prevent charging or power. So it's kind of a symptom of multiple things, but that's potentially a cause. And then the last one is going to be the board itself. So before I move on to the next scenario, I'm going to show a couple different devices. So I'm going to zoom out real quick. On my Samsung right here, one of the common causes of a Samsung not charging, aside from everything we mentioned on the iPhone, it's all the same across devices, is this right here, this wireless charging coil. Now, this S7 isn't doing it, but if the charging coil is damaged or missing on certain Samsungs, what'll happen is when you plug in the charging cable, which let me plug one in real quick. So when I plug in the charging cable on a, so I'm going to remove it just to demonstrate it. If I plug in the charging cable, Samsung that and hit the battery icon and a triangle. A common one on the older phones would say charging pause, battery temperature too low. Typically it was related to the wireless charging coil or the back cover of the phone. This one is not doing it, but there are some Samsungs that do cause that. So if you're ever doing a Samsung screen repair, other repair, make sure that you have all the parts present. You don't have to fully screw it in, just enough to where these contacts on the coil, this right here, makes contact with the pins on the board. If that's good, then you shouldn't have any issues with charging. I mentioned board level cause is another reason a phone would not charge or device may not charge. I'm going to take my iPad board that's over here on the far left. I don't have the full device. This is actually one that we're fixing right now. So this iPad is not charging. We checked the charging port, we checked the battery, so the last thing would be the board. Common failure on Apple devices is the TriStar, and that's the chip that controls charging. So it's on the board over here in this area. What I'm going to do is use our TriStar tester. This tool specifically checks the charging circuit and identifies if there is an issue with the TriStar. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and I'll zoom in here in a second once I have everything plugged up. All right, so there's the screen on the TriStar tester. I'm going to hit quick test. And what it's doing is running through all of the different traces in that charging circuit that would have to do with a failure, and it'll tell us what's going on. So here we got fail, and it says check TriStar/Hydra. That's another name for it, another component. And then it says check net PP5V. So that's another line on there. So this tells me that the TriStar is either bad or not present. And this one, to simulate the TriStar being bad, we actually removed the chip, so there's no TriStar on this board, which is why it's failing. This tool is good if you are a repair shop and you're getting multiple devices in for charging issues. I would say this is more on the advanced side because this is good for identifying it, but the next step from there would be being able to fix it. And micro soldering on a TriStar is, I would say, a mid to higher tier type repair. So it's not for the faint of heart. You do have to practice and get that repair down before you're able to do it. So speaking of this, TriStar is our keyword for the day. So if you are watching, that's what you're going to want to type in the comments. Again, that's TriStar, which it's spelled on here. I don't know if you can see that. It's little letters right there, but that's our keyword. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to unplug the TriStar tester, and then we're going to move on to our next scenario, because I feel like not charging is the biggest scenario we'll see. The next one is going to be related to intermittent power and boot looping. So this one, there's a couple causes for that. The biggest one is going to be damaged parts. So when the phone boots up, it basically runs through a checklist of, am I getting signal from here? Am I getting power from here? If there is something damaged, it can cause a problem with that boot process. Or say you're using the phone, it'll randomly shut off. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you did a back glass repair on, let's say, an iPhone 12, a common scenario is when you're prying off the back glass, if you hit that power flex cable, when the phone boots up, it'll run for a little bit, or it may not boot up, depending on the type of damage. But a common scenario is it'll turn off after 2 minutes. So that's what we mean by intermittent power boot looping. The best way to identify this is basically to unplug all the parts that are plugged into the board. So I would unplug my charging port, my battery, my camera, any other cables that are plugged up over here, and then plug in the bare minimum needed. So I would plug in my battery and my charging port and my screen. Another potential test is taking the board out and plugging in just the charging port, battery, and screen, because then you know if there's some type of grounding issue happening, it's happening when the board is in the frame. So again, by trial and error, you can identify it's my power flex or it's my front camera. A while ago, a common issue was the iPhone 7 front camera being damaged would cause a boot loop. The phone would boot up, Apple logo, and then it would reboot. So those kind of things, again, you can test by just disconnecting those parts. I haven't been plugging in my front camera when I plug in my screen. It's not needed for the phone to boot, but if you have a bad front camera, it can definitely cause a boot loop issue. Second from there is going to be a damaged board level component. So when you are doing a repair, if you knock a component loose, or say the battery's connected and you have a metal tool between two components and they arc or they short out, that can cause damage to the board and presents a boot loop issue. When you get into these higher level ones, you are going to need to be able to micro solder or micro soldering tech. They are services that we offer. The biggest tip I would give you is if you unplug the battery when you're doing any repair and plug it in last, the issue is minimized. Also, be gentle when dealing with the boards. If you're disconnecting cables, you never want to use excessive force because that can cause issues with damage. And then the last one is going to just be your battery. A battery that is bad is either bloated or just degraded to the point where it can't provide consistent current to the board. So if, say, the current needs spikes from the board and the battery can deliver it, it'll just turn off. Or it'll turn off and then Apple logo and it's in that boot looping process. As I mentioned earlier, to diagnose charging, simple is plug in a new battery without removing the old one. If the issue persists, you've got something going on with the board or another modular part. But if the issue is not persisting, then it's just a battery replacement. So pretty straightforward there. And then the last scenario I have here is no power at all. So this is whether a device comes into you that way, not turning on at all, or you were repairing it and now you get no signs of life. The best thing I can recommend here is start with the basics. Like I mentioned with the charging port, start with the known working cable. Move from there to checking the charging port because that's how the power gets into the device. Check a battery because you might change the scenario, but at least it tells you what's going on. So for example, I had no power on my phone. I plugged a new battery in. The phone turns on, but it's not charging. So that to me says it's not so much an issue with the phone turning on, it's an issue with the charging circuit. So whether that's the port itself, which would be down here, or something on the logic board like the TriStar on the iPad. So it's important to be able to identify that so you're not going on a wild goose chase, changing everything on the phone and spending countless hours sometimes to figure out what exactly needs to be done. So as I mentioned, the battery is the most common one. You can have board level damage that causes that. And the last thing is, as I mentioned, with the intermittent power or not charging, a modular part can cause a short, which can also cause the device not to power up at all. So they're all kind of related, these three common issues. They were just slightly different. That's why I wanted to cover them separately. But a lot of the times they are relative to each other. So it's important to kind of know that. But biggest tip I can give you is don't overcomplicate things. Start with the simple stuff. A lot of times that's overlooked. And if you send a device into us for escalated repair, that's what we always start with, is the simple stuff, because you never know. To close out the diagnostics and covering the common issues, the tool of the day that we're highlighting is going to be our USB multi-port charger with ammeter built in. The SKU is 130, what is that, Scott? 1011? 0511. We have a QR code linked to that. Okay, we don't have it linked to that, but it's 0511. The QR code that we do have linked, so that's my mistake. It's going to pop up here. We're currently running our 12 days of deals promotion through the 26th. This includes a deal every day up until Christmas. So far, we have 50% off our B-grade iPad Air 16 gigs, so they're $50 iPads. The second day was if you add a premium opening tool, the iSesamo style opening tool, to your cart with another something else that you ordered, it was free. Third day, we have the iPad 789 white digitizer for $5, and that SKU I believe is 822-13001. And then today we have $8 bulk tempered glass packs. Sorry, it's a tongue twister. So that's all the iPhones. So whether it's an iPhone 14, a 13, a 12, they're normally $14.99. Right now they're reduced down to $8. So if you've been needing to stock up on tempered glass, this is a good time to do it. And every day up to Christmas, we're going to be releasing another deal. These deals are all concurrent, so they're all happening at the same time. The only time the deal is going to expire is if we no longer have that product available. So definitely get your order in sooner rather than later, so we can get that shipped to you as soon as possible. But that's all we had for today's stream. Let me check the live chat real quick. I'm not seeing anyone commented, so hopefully you pick this up later. I'll have the Tech Bob toolkit set to the side, so hopefully some lucky winner will get that shipped out here soon. And as I mentioned again, these are the tools that I handpicked because they're the ones on my desk. It does include the 6-port charger, so if you've been wanting to pick one of these up, I included it in there because I do use it every day. If someone brings a device to me and says, hey, this isn't charging, what do I do? First thing I do is plug it into this, so it gives me at least a baseline to figure out what's going on. But definitely a good tool, a good set of tools to pick up. So I hope everyone enjoyed today's stream. Again, it was a common thing. We've had some calls and customers requests lately, so I figured why not let everyone know what our process is and what the recommended resolutions are. So that's all we had for today. The next 2 streams, because they are close to holidays, are going to be pre-recorded. So we'll post those at the same time that we go live on Fridays normally, but they will be pre-recorded. So hope everyone had a good week, and we'll see everyone on next week's stream.